Tech Cocktail Sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. I wanted to talk about POPVOX first and then how we got started, but Frank gave us a really good introduction. So POPVOX.com is a neutral, nonpartisan platform that allows individuals to communicate with their members of Congress. How it works is go to the site, POPVOX.com, if you have your iPad or iPhone, and you can find an issue that you care about and find what bills are related to that issue, and then write a letter to your member of Congress. What we do is we verify your address so that Congress has verification that you are a constituent of their congressional district. And then we deliver the message to Congress. And we guarantee message delivery so that you have the assurance that your message was delivered, and if you don't hear back from your member of Congress, you know that it wasn't the platform that was the problem, but something with the congressional office themselves. We also have what we call our pro tools, which are for organizations, trade associations, advocacy groups that want to have the entire Right Congress process embedded onto their own organization's website. So it's a seamless interaction with the organization's member or the trade association's membership to deliver letters to Congress. And then most recently, as Frank alluded, the House Democrats announced that they're using POPVOX's API to, in real time, stream POPVOX content onto House Democrats' intranet system. That means that the 2,000 or so House congressional staffers that use the Democrat internet system get to have POPVOX data coming in, sentiment, that's public sentiment for bills, supporting and opposing, as well as organization statements. And that's pretty cool because that sends the public's voice right directly into Congress, the way Congress needs to see it. So how do we get started? How do we go from idea to product? And that goes to the first point I wanted to make, which was know the problem. And I was a lobbyist for several years before launching POPVOX. But the story really starts when I first came to DC, because I came to DC, I wanted to work in politics, I wanted to work for advocacy groups and really make a difference in the policymaking process. So I went to Georgetown for grad school in public policy, and then started working on political campaigns for various advocacy groups, and that brought me to being a lobbyist. Now, how many of you are familiar with lobbying or the industry? Okay, so basically you know what I did. I'd go to different legislative offices on the Hill and tell them about whatever issue that my organization was supporting or opposing, and urge them to support it. What ended up happening was my organization also had a grassroots advocacy campaign going, and oftentimes when I was doing direct lobbying and sitting in front of the congressional staffer, and I'd say, hey, by the way, there's 200 or 50 or whatever number of constituents from your district that wrote a letter to your boss, which is the member of Congress, about this bill. So we really need your boss to co-sponsor it or vote for it or whatever. And the staffer would look at me and say, no, I don't remember seeing those letters. And I just assumed they were lying, so I just smiled. I'm like, okay, thanks. And then I'd move on. So once in 2009, I was sitting at a dinner party, and this woman next to me, Marcy Harris, and I started talking. And Marcy asked me the thing that everyone in DC asks, so what do you do for a living? So I said, well, actually, I'm a lobbyist for an advocacy organization. And she was like, oh, okay, well, I'm a congressional staffer. And I was like, really? That's awesome. So I started talking because I assumed I could either pitch her on something. But what we ended up talking about, because I had had a glass of wine and I was feeling really bold, was I looked at her, and you guys know what I mean. I looked at her and I said, I don't understand. I go into congressional offices, I ask them about whether they've received all these letters from our membership, and sometimes they look at me like they have no idea what I'm talking about. What's the deal with that? Are they just all liars? And she looked at me and she said, you know what? There's 300 million email messages that come into Congress with no way to verify if they're really a constituent or just Mickey Mouse on Main Street. And it's really hard for the congressional staffer to know in real time what people feel about a particular bill or an issue. So that initial conversation led to both of us talking over months about what we could do to change things, because we realized we were talking about the same problem but from different sides. So the next point that I want to make is, when you're thinking of a solution, think big. And it's like one of those go big or go home moments. So she and I thought, well, if we could create a platform from scratch that would solve this problem of grassroots advocacy not being effective or as effective as it should be in moving legislation, what would it look like? We didn't want to create a Band-Aid. What we wanted to do was just start from scratch and find a brand new way of doing things. And what we came up with was, at the time, what we called the LinkedIn for legislative advocacy. And we kept thinking about that idea and just going through it, talking to as many people as possible to refine our idea and iterate, as they call it, and tweak it and make it into something that would be really effective for advocacy and just really transform the grassroots advocacy world. But we quickly realized, me with my policy degree and Marcy with her law degree, neither of us knew technology. So the point that I want to make is, don't let the talents you don't have hold you back. So since we didn't know how to build a website, or we didn't know what HTML was, for example, we decided to go find some technologists that did. And we found a great government data expert, Josh Tauber. And we also found a great design team. We wanted somebody that was outside of, basically outside of the Beltway, that could understand what just regular people out there are feeling, and create something that was friendly enough that people from all over the country could use. And we didn't want something that was like red, white, and blue, or bald eagle themed and stuff. Not because we don't love bald eagles, we do. But, I mean, we're nonpartisan, so I shouldn't state that. No. But what we wanted was something that people from all over the country would feel comfortable with using in order to communicate with Congress. What we also had to do and spend a lot of time thinking about was, who were these people that we wanted to come to our website? Who were they? And what motivated them and what drove them? And we thought about use cases, and we spent so much time thinking about these individuals that we ended up creating names for them. We had like our overwhelmed staffer, and we drew a little picture of her and how she's trying to find as much information as she can in real time to brief her boss about some obscure issue. We thought about the grassroots advocate who works for a small grassroots organization that doesn't have the resources to move legislation. By that I mean the money to go to the right fundraisers and talk to the right people, but has a lot of passion and a lot of heart. And what does he need to get his job done to maximize and amplify the voice of his small grassroots organization? And then we thought about the users, the individuals out there. They're probably feeling frustrated. They've been signing petitions. How many of you have signed a petition or done something like, this is the most important thing you can do? And feeling frustrated that, hey, maybe they didn't hear back from their member of Congress, or maybe they felt like they were the only one doing this in isolation, and they didn't see if there was like nationwide support or if it was just them. And we created names for these individuals, and for our user, we called her Cynical Cindy. So like every time we created something or came up with an idea, we'd always think, okay, what does Cynical Cindy think? And we just did these cute names so that we'd remember them really well. And then we drew these out. So Marcy and I, not being technologists, we actually took paper and markers and we like drew out what we wanted our website to look like and what the entire user experience was like. So then when we went to developers, when we went to our designers, they knew what we were looking for. And then the thing that was probably the most scariest was when do you launch and how do you launch? So what we wanted to do was create a minimum viable product, and that's probably a word that everyone talks about in terms of like what's the most basic thing we can do to get a product out there that these users would actually use and it would solve some sort of problem. The interesting thing for us was we'd been thinking about this idea for so long and like planning it and thinking that the actual thing of taking it from the abstraction of here it is in theory to actually putting it out there so the world, the universe, whatever can look at it was really scary. So there was this was in 2010, we were sitting in one of our advisors' offices, Janice Frazier, and it was the founding team there, and she's like, when are you guys gonna launch? And I said, I don't know, I don't think we're ready. And she said, you know, you have been saying that for many months now. Just pick a random date and just launch it with no fanfare, just launch it, put it out there, and then iterate. You know, get feedback from users, see what they like, what they don't like, where their fears are, their uncertainty about the product, and then make changes on it. But just get it out there, it doesn't matter. So we picked a random date in November 2010 and launched. And we didn't want to tell anybody, so we called the two people we could trust the most, and that was my mom and Marcy's mom. And we said, hey, and I called my mom, I was like, Mom, we just launched POPVOX.com. Will you go there and like test it out, and like wherever you get stuck, then call me back and tell me where you got stuck. So she's like, okay. And my mom lives out in California. So she was like all excited, and she's like, okay, I'll call you back. So I'm like standing by the phone waiting, 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by, and I don't hear from her. I'm like, this is weird. And then it's like that awkward thing of like, do I call back? Maybe she like got busy or something. And so an hour goes by, and I was like, I can't take it anymore. And I call her, and I was like, hey, Mom, how'd it go? And she goes, what? And I said, well, how did POPVOX.com go? Did you like it? What happened? Where are you stuck? Because I just assumed she was stuck somewhere. And she said, oh yeah, I went on the site, I found a bill that I was interested in, I wrote a letter to my congressman, and then I found another bill that I liked, and I wrote another bill. I wrote another letter, and then I had to go make dinner. So I hit send, and I went to make dinner. And I was like, oh, well, you didn't call me back. And she's like, well, you said to call back only if I had a problem, and it went great, so I didn't have a problem, so I never called. So I was like, oh, but inside I was like, yes, it passed the mom test. And I called Marcy, told her, and of course, Marcy was like, yeah, my mom did it too, it was great, you know, and then we thought, okay, now we can tell our friends about it, or actually go beta test for real outside of our moms. And luckily, I live in DuPont Circle, and there's a coffee shop right across the street from my apartment. And so I started just hanging out at the coffee shop and user testing. So anytime anyone came into the coffee shop, I was like, hey, do you want to like check out my cool website and just user test for me? And half the time they don't know what that means. So I just would like hover over them and watch them use the site. And you can see from someone's mouse usage of where they could get stuck, where they're not sure where to go, and then just get feedback from them in real time. And surprisingly, most people don't mind being asked to user test. I don't think anyone has ever said no to me, or maybe they're having this conversation saying, oh my gosh, don't talk to her, you'll get stuck for 20 minutes on her website. But as you grow and as you have more users, your users become beta users. And every time we're about to launch a new feature or a new product, what ends up happening is we'll talk to our what we call our power users. And from going from like cynical Cindy, who is like our mythical user, we actually have we have Alan and Gary and T, and we know these people, and they tell us when something sucks, or they tell us when something's totally awesome and they want more of it. And that's and that brings me to the other point of make sure you're focused on your users and you're always iterating and always getting as much feedback as possible. And finally, I want to end by bringing it back to where we are in Washington, D.C., and talking about what it's like to be an entrepreneur in D.C., and to get you all excited about starting whatever it is that you want to start. Being in politics and being a lobbyist, it seemed like everything was a dichotomy, right? In politics, you either win or you lose. In lobbying, your bill either passes or it fails, and there's a lot of one or the other. What I found in my experience with being an entrepreneur and starting something new is that it's not necessarily a zero-sum game. You have a problem, you know your problem, you know you have the solution, but it's just a matter of like iterating, trying things out. If something doesn't work, then iterate, pivot, do a total course correction if you have to, but you keep at it. And I think more importantly, in a city like DC where the entrepreneur community is growing, there's so many opportunities to connect with other entrepreneurs, and they're all so encouraging and so helpful and so supportive, and they're always throwing out ideas. Hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Networking, throwing your name out there. So many of you in this room have thrown our name out there, especially when we were starting, just to like get us just somewhere, get us some marketing, get us some free visibility. And that's the kind of community that is so important for to be a successful entrepreneur, and I hope that's what you come away with tonight. And please go to popvox.com, try it out. That's the shameless plug. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.